Hey people, how you doing? Welcome to episode 174 of the Sports Therapy Association podcast. Recorded as always live every Tuesday on the Sports Therapy Association YouTube channel. And recently I've also been streaming it live to the Sports Therapy Association Facebook page and the Facebook group, because we're having a few connection problems with YouTube, but hopefully it's all fixed now. Anyway, so my name is Matt Phillips, creator of RunChatLive.com, and we are just a week away now from Therapy Expo 2023. It's so bizarre. We started the countdown a while back, and now we're suddenly talking about next week. Brilliant. So yeah, at the NEC Birmingham, November the 22nd and 23rd. As always, the Sports Therapy Association will be there. We've got a stand, as always. The number of people helping with the stand gets larger and larger, and we'll have 2 days of fantastic presentations in what is called the STA Therapy Update Theatre, where STA obviously stands for Sports Therapy Association. Tonight is our last chance then before next week to bring you a chat with some speakers from Therapy Expo, and I am thrilled to say we actually have 2 speakers for you tonight. Joining me shortly will be Chris Tiley, founder of Never Too Old to Lift, and Chris Kitson of Rockstar Runners, formerly known as Endurance Therapy and Performance. I mean, they're both going to be with me very shortly because the 2 Chris's are going to be presenting Training the Older Adult for Performance. That's going to be at 2:30 p.m. on day 2 at Therapy Expo. So that's November the 23rd. Also known as next Thursday, which is probably an easier way to talk about it. Before I do bring them on, then just to remind you, if you are joining us live from the Facebook open group and you do want to add comments, then what you need to do is just make sure, and it's only a one-off thing, you shouldn't have to do it every week. It's just a one-off thing where you have to give Facebook permission to put your comments up on the screen. So you'll see at the bottom of the feed now, if you're watching the live broadcast, that there's a little link there, which is basically b.live/comments-issue. Okay, b.live/comments-issue. So if you do see you made a comment, it just comes up a Facebook user. That's because you haven't clicked that link or you haven't typed in that link, and that's why. Otherwise, you'll just appear as a stranger. It's a Facebook thing. It's not me. It's not you. It's Facebook. Anyway, right. So that is the intro done and dusted. We have got people joining the live lounge. So what I will do now, without further ado, I think, is bring up tonight's guests, Chris Tiley and Chris Kitson. Hey, Chris's. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
For people listening to the podcast, the first one with a slightly more northern twang was Chris Kitson. What part of the country are you in at the moment, Chris?
I'm in Leeds.
There you go, in Leeds. So that's Chris Kitson in Leeds. Got a Chris Moyle type thing if you're just listening. Doesn't look like Chris. Well, actually, Chris Moyle's lost about 25 stone. So it's more similar than when I grew up. Sorry, Chris, nothing against Chris Moyle's. But yeah, it's not too dissimilar now. He's quite handsome now. Not as handsome as Chris Kitson. And the other Chris is Chris Tiley, who is coming from whereabouts in the country are you, Chris?
Birmingham or Solihull, so just down the road from NEC.
Not born in Birmingham, though, were you?
No.
Where were you
Reading.
Born? Reading. There we go.
Yeah.
Reading.
And there is an H in my name. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I put you down as Chris for CR. Looks like some kind of Let's get rid of that. Let's change that. Anyway, so thank you so much for joining us both. Very kind of you. And I should say thank you very much for giving us this joint presentation. I haven't got many joint presentations going on, but we're going to talk about that because it's interesting. You're both from slightly different backgrounds. For people who haven't heard of you, and I'm hoping that of the 3,000 or so who download this, they haven't heard of you. Otherwise, we may as well just all nail ourselves in a box and just go in the ocean and disappear forever because it's just a big echo chamber. Chris Kitson, maybe first of all, could you give people a little bit of a breakdown of who you are and what you do and kind of what sort of clients you generally look after?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, my name is Chris Kitson. So based in Leeds, I do a little bit of a mixture of face-to-face and online work. Been coaching, started off in kind of personal training around about kind of 14, 15 years ago. Then got into therapy after a kind of few years of doing that. Went to do a master's in osteopathy. Kind of came away from osteopathy, interestingly enough, joined the STA. And I tend to now coach. I coach runners mainly is the main thing that I do. And also see a lot of runners as well in the therapy setting. See a little bit of general population still as well, but I've just more recently just kind of niched down into the running side of things, and that's mainly kind of what I do at the moment, really.
Fantastic. And I love the alliteration Rockstar runners. Fantastic. What's the history behind that? Why did you decide to come out of the endurance, which was at the time great that you could get hold of that? Why have you become Rockstar runners? We're interested on the business level.
Good question. So it was kind of off the back of a little bit of a spin-off, I guess, like the my background. So I used to play drums for a living at one point. So there's a little bit of a spin-off there. Not saying that I'm a rock star or anything, but it was more to do with actually it's a little bit deeper, if I'm honest. So it's to do with like actually scary, I know.
Keep it light.
So it's to do with how people feel. And it was basically that a lot of people would start to kind of like lose their driving life a little bit, and actually wanting to feel like, make them feel like a rock star again, essentially. So get them back to a point where they're proud of what they can do, and actually they get that kind of sensation, that feeling back, really.
That's brilliant. I didn't realize I hadn't made that connotation because I've seen you playing the drums. I thought, excellent, that's great. He's bringing his past in, but actually it's more than that. That's brilliant. So you're helping people just feel like a rock star.
There you go. Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. That's so good. I'm not going to be able to think of anything else now. So I'm thinking how good that is. Excellent. Right. Thank you very much for letting people know. So Chris Tiley, for people who don't know about you and Never Toiled to Lift, what's your story and who do you look after mostly?
Yeah, so I'm a physiotherapist. So I qualified 2008. So scarily 15 years ago coming up. So I worked in various settings, main sort of hospitals to start with, then sports teams, and eventually into private practice, and then kind of set up on my own, sort of working with Mike Rice in movement therapy clinics. But yeah, I then started to kind of develop a bit of a, just in the demographic I saw, a bit of a niche in working with older adults, and started to kind of incorporate some of the stuff that I worked with the sports teams, so the strength and conditioning side of things, and started to incorporate it with the older adults, and found it far more rewarding than I ever did with the sports teams, and kind of Never Toiled to Lift evolved from there as I sort of try to kind of create the blog and share the message a bit further. And it's, yeah, lockdown gave me a bit more time to push that a bit more, and yeah, it's kind of grown from there.
Fantastic. So yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we've all worked with a few older clients because, no surprise, quite a lot of our population are older. But it is, I mean, we've talked a lot to other people about how kids aren't just kind of like kids aren't little adults. That's the one. I think there's lots of misconceptions about older people as well, thinking that they can't do anything and you've got to be so careful with them. I suppose, do you feel that part of your role is to break down those misconceptions?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, everyone thinks that as you get older, we should maybe tone down the things that we maybe do, and maybe stop the sports and take away any impact, and maybe stick with non-impact stuff like the swimming, the cycling, Pilates, which, again, I'm not knocking that because they're all fantastic forms of exercise. But actually, if you look at all the guidelines when it comes to the World Health Organization and their physical activity guidelines, they say that for 18 to 65-year-olds, we should be doing 2 sessions of muscle strengthening. But they've got a separate set of guidelines for 65 plus that say we should be doing 3 sessions of muscle strengthening per week, which completely kind of is counter to what you think you should be maybe doing less of that kind of thing, but actually we should be doing a lot more. So, and a lot that comes as a shock to many people. But equally, it's completely understandable why people might be fearful of doing things that are considered higher load or kind of higher stress exercises, because yes, there is a risk involved, but we've got to just take their age in mind and all the things that predisposes them to, and it makes us start a bit slower and a bit more careful, but it's a strength that ultimately is going to help half the things that they're worried about.
Excellent. I did think of you. We had a guest. In fact, you probably know the guys. You've probably seen him at Therapy Expo. Alistair Beverley was a guest in episode 172, and his background is working with people with learning/intellectual disabilities. And his big thing was talking about diagnostic overshadowing. And in the episode we had recently, he made a point of it's not just people with learning/intellectual disabilities who run the risk of diagnostic overshadowing, where we misinterpret maybe a symptom they've got as, oh, they've got a learning disability, they've got Down syndrome, so that's why they're kind of like doing that. He also made a really valid point that with the older generation, for example, it's the same thing can happen and does happen tragically in the NHS, where people will die because they went for a checkup and they thought, oh, well, they're just sitting there mumbling a little bit to themselves kind of thing and doing that with their mouth because they're old. Whereas if they were a younger person who came in to the GP or to the clinic, wherever, and they were given a full assessment and that assumption wasn't made, that, you know, some things would have been caught. Have you come across that working with the aged and what they've told you and what you've seen in personal life?
Still.
Oh, yeah, Chris Tiley. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think what came to mind there is more, I think, when the decline is more the decline in physical health is, rather than the GP or anyone actually kind of trying to make a plan for it, it's use the age as an excuse rather than age as a motivator to maybe do something about this. And the thing that I was going to say that came to mind is one of the stats out there that if someone has a fall and fractures their hip, within a year, 20% of them will end up in long-term care and never leave. And it's kind of slightly different because it's not necessarily saying that it's different from if a young person fractured the hip, because it's clear that that's not quite the case. But yeah, certainly I think it's the fact that they've got to the point where they've got an increased chance of falls. If they've got reduced muscle strength, they've probably got reduced bone density, more likely to have a fracture, period of hospitalization with a prolonged recovery period where they're not going to be as active. They're going to have a even increased kind of rate of sarcopenia or that loss of muscle strength. And then I think that's why that long-term care comes into play, where if they haven't entered it within a year, they're probably going to enter it at some point in the next sort of 5 years. So rather than kind of waiting to that point, and yeah, ideally we'd all be starting in 2030s and continuing all the way through. But yeah, the thing I found that he's given me permission, is a guy called Phil, and I've used him in the talk at the on your stage a couple of times now. And he came in at age 76, having never done any sport since school, sporadic swimming here and there, bit of tennis, he said, but he's never done anything. He's active in the garden. But yeah, at 76, he came in and started with me more for his knee and never had any intention of strength training, but it kind of gradually evolved into that as we started to work on some strength around his knee. And then I kind of pushed him towards the strength training, and he's continued with me since, with a couple of breaks through lockdown. And he's got to the point where he can squat 60 kilograms and deadlift 65, and he only weighs 63 kilograms himself.
Say it's his weight,
and he's 80. He's just turned 80 this year, and his knee's still aware of it, but it's not stopping him doing anything, and he's doing everything in the garden again. And I mean, the point to that is that, yeah, yes, it would have been better to start yesterday, but today is not too late to start. And yeah, like I say, we have to adapt around his knee and adapt around certain things. But
amazing. Great story. I love that. And I'm already kind of seeing parallels with, well, obviously I'm biased. I'm in Chris's camp with runners and things, but I'm thinking of runners who come in and they never plan to come in and leave doing strength training. That was far from their thoughts, but you kind of get that therapeutic alliance. Is that fair to say, Chris, with the population you work with? Do they come in not expecting what they walk out with?
Is that for me? Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just saying, Chris. By the end of this, I'll start using your last names. But yeah, Chris Kitson. I'm looking at you, thinking that you can see me looking.
Yeah, I think so, and certainly, like, I mean, as Chris was speaking there, I think a lot of the time, like when you basically start to show people what they can do as well, because a lot of the time, obviously, you know, like we discussed earlier, like around kind of societal issues and what's been said and what they've heard of family and friends often and things, and it's not that people are trying to do them any harm or anything like that, but essentially I think it's easy to get in the head that they probably shouldn't be doing certain things, and actually when it's under the guidance of a professional, and it gives them that a little bit of confidence back, especially in obviously supervised sessions initially as well, that can be really powerful. And then just even that kind of like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and then what that feeds off into, and it kind of sparks this inspiration again for them. And certainly, like I see it in a lot of the runners as well, where again they've just kind of thought, well, strength training is not for me. I'm a runner. This is what I do. They might have heard about it, but it's actually a lot of the time, and a lot of the barriers I think come from just a lack of clarity around actually what it is that they need to do. And then actually, again, like showing them that they can do it, and actually they're quite proficient in it as well. And just showing them, and again, like a way forwards, and what that looks like. Because I think sometimes it's just kind of muddy waters. And when you can provide a little bit more clarity for people and give them a little bit more guidance, all of a sudden they kind of see the path forward again. And they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I think I can do that. And then again, gain that inspiration and kind of push on a little bit more.
Brilliant. I like that expression, muddy waters. And that kind of, I mean, with so many times on the episode, we've talked about how our role has changed from once upon a time. And we all did this. If you've been in the game for longer than 10 years, then you saw yourself as a fixer, and they'd come in and you just wanted to fix them, whether that meant stretching them or strengthening a particular muscle, or kind of you would put your hands on them and do stuff. But now we know that we are clearing muddy waters. So we're kind of educating, we're helping get rid of some myths and misconceptions in a nice way. And that's, you know, we're doing an awful lot now with our ears and mouth, as opposed to just relying on our hands and stuff. So it's really nice to hear that reinforced. Chris, do the Chris Tiley, the older, I feel so weird saying your surname, it's like school, but Tiley, stop, take the gum out, Tiley. Thank you. Put it, that's it. So yeah, the population you see, the elder population, do they have misconceptions? Do a lot of them feel that they shouldn't be lifting stuff and shouldn't, have got to take it easy now because of things they read or things they're told maybe by loved ones and that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it just reminds me, one off the top of my head was I'd been treating her husband and got him to do some strength work before, and he convinced her to come in. But one of the things I like to do is, I don't know if you've seen these blaze pods. They're there's basically these lights that you can tap that can be different colors, and once you tap one, another one lights up. And I've got a Jill that I tend to use all the time, because once I found something I like, I tend to just stick with it. If it's but it comes up with 3 colors on the floor, and if it's red, they stand up and tap it with a foot. If it goes green, they go crawl on their hands and knees and they tap it with their hand. And if it's blue, they shuffle on the bum and then tap it with the hand again. And I had him doing that, and he really enjoyed it. And I remember when she came in, she adamantly told me, I won't be doing that. A woman of my age shouldn't be doing that. It should be crawling around on the floor and doing things like that. And I tried to tell her that actually, if you were to fall, it's not the fall that scares most people, it's getting stuck on the floor. And if you've practiced crawling around the floor and maneuvering and transferring from bum to hands and knees to then lean on something to stand back up again, then the confidence to be able to stand is huge. And that really kind of allows people to move around a bit more, because if they're not scared of falling or getting stuck, they'll then push themselves a little bit further around the house. Whereas if they're scared, they'll tend to just sit down most of the time and decondition further. So there's a few things like that. And then there's another one that recently I've kind of got going with an online course, and one of my first members has, I don't know if you've seen this test, the sit rise test. And it's good challenge. I first remember a program, How to Stay Young, and it was Angela Rippon and the twins.
Yeah.
It was only about 8-9 years ago.
Angela Rippon, yeah.
Okay. But basically they did this test, and it's whether you can sit down from standing, sit down on the floor, and then stand back up again using as few points of contact. So the best score is if you can get down to the floor without using your hands, and then get yourself back up to standing again. They kind of use this cross-legged position to get back up again. But anyway, this kind of participant at the course, she had always seen it on social media and people trying it, but she'd never tried it herself, because she just automatically assumed it's something she wouldn't be able to do. And then because I told her to, on the course, it's something to try to do as a baseline test to see if it improves, she then gave it a go and completely shocked herself that she could do it.
Oh, so good.
And then it unlocked in her mind, well, if I've told myself I couldn't do that, what else have I told myself I couldn't do? And the thought of using weights again is something that she'd never thought she could do, and now she's started to do that. And she thought this was going to something she's going to do at home through lack of confidence, but now she's got a bit of confidence. She's back in the gym, and that's something she again never thought she'd do. So I think there's a lot of that just down to a personal level of, we talk ourselves out of thinking we can do things that actually we're more than capable of doing. But the longer we talk ourselves out of it, the more of a problem it becomes later on, and we can't do it.
Amazing. That's so nice. I can see Chris smiling there, nodding and going all kind of warm and kind of thing. 'Cause that's just
Yeah.
that's just what makes music. It's music to our ears, isn't it? When we see a client realizing I can do that. It's like Keanu Reeves in Matrix kind of thing, isn't it? Show me more, sort of thing. But it's so powerful. It really is so powerful. It's really nice. It's also nice to hear you talking about the kind of reaction timings, because we had Angela Jackson on in episode 169. He was talking about neurocognitive approaches and how that might be the missing part of rehab. So with all athletes, we're doing everything else, and then we're missing that out maybe from the end stage or even at the beginning stage, because the studies are showing that if you have been injured, then the pathways to your brain, which are controlling coordination and all that dexterity and stuff, are kind of hindered and blurred. And that, so unless you do some rehab which is stimulating that, you might get back to a state of recovery where it looks like you can go back to your chosen sport, whatever. But if you haven't got that reactive stuff and coordination, then you're going to kind of injure yourself again. Which interesting was why she, who's Angela Jackson is so cool, but that's why she was kind of thinking, we're obviously missing something, because one of the biggest risk factors with injury is, have you had the same injury before? Which is kind of such an obvious one, isn't it? I heard her say that. That's why I love talking to you guys and you experts, because you come out with things like that. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's so true. All the stuff we're doing, and yet hamstrings, for example, if one of the biggest factors which predisposes you to injury again is, have you been injured before? So we must be missing something in rehab, which is why the studies now are really focusing on that and doing fMRI and all that and seeing that there is a inhibition. So it's great hearing you guys reinforce each other. That's what I'm kind of saying in a long-winded way. So Chris, runners are regarded as veteran. Oh, sorry, Kitson. Oh my God!
I was just waiting for Chris Tiley just to start piping up here.
Rubbish. Sorry about this, guys. It's lovely to see you two. I just forget we're doing a podcast. I really do. I'm getting old, man. Talking about veterans. But yeah, veteran runners, Chris Kitson. Was it 34? Hasn't changed, is it? Or 34, 35? When is it you're in a race?
Pretty much your class as a masters athlete, anything 35 and above.
35 and above. Kind of masters. They're not using the word veteran anymore. Is that kind of not very PC? Or
yeah, they just class them as masters, and
which is a polite way of saying getting on a bit. Why choose that age? Is there anything that you've come across which kind of shows that once you've passed 35, you need to be in a different category because you've got limitations, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I suppose. Really, there's certain changes obviously that do happen from a physiological standpoint. There's quite a nice paper I sent Chris earlier actually. Rich Willie and Paquette, so they've got a paper for, I think it's 2019 off the top of my head, which basically looks at this, like physiological changes with different age ranges and biomechanical changes as well. So there are certain things that happen, so things like changes in leg stiffness and things like this as well. So it's one of the things where we start to look then at like different potential injuries that might come off the back of that as well. So we tend to see a lot more kind of tendon related issues and like muscular tendon disjunctions and those sort of issues really that tend to come up from this kind of change in the actual tendons. So essentially it's obviously that lack of kind of elasticity or certainly a decrease in over time. So we tend to see obviously then an increased strain on those areas essentially. So yes, in a nutshell, there are certain changes that do happen. Hence why you will typically see a change in performance that goes with that as well. Obviously, it's changed a little bit in ways in terms of things like super shoes now as well, and kind of using their technology to kind of help out a little bit more sometimes. So there's been a little bit of a difference there. But essentially, when it comes to obviously actual physical changes in the body, then from around about that kind of age group, that's where we start to see some of the bigger changes, and especially kind of like 40s onwards, and kind of move into that sort of age group really.
Excellent. Nice reference. So yeah, Rich Willie is always, from a long time, he's only start being noticed probably about if you're a veteran or masters athlete and you want to save yourself from injury, just do your calf raises, get strong, get those calves working, which is great advice. So I'm wondering whether, and this is guys more, is it down to kind of a reduction in testosterone? Is that why guys kind of see it more? And why the women often in endurance sports are kind of still there doing really well and catching the guys up, it's testosterone.
Yeah, it's definitely an influencer
Mm.
in it. Whether it's everything again,
Mm.
obviously we don't know, but yeah, essentially it will be an influence. I mean, certainly, obviously again with those sort of age ranges and with females as well, there's obviously different changes hormonally, and that really comes into things as well. Again, it just all presents differently, doesn't it? So it's just again, the person in front of you as always, and certainly with hormonal changes, obviously it's very individual as well. Aside from basic principles, but just really seeing again what's the presentation, where are they up to, and what are they experiencing, and just making sure obviously they've got the right help as well in that side. So yeah,
we do all get that. I'm thinking maybe guys more than girls, but we do all get that getting out the chair kind of, once we get to kind of 35, 36. It just happens, doesn't it? And we kind of, that should be a sign that we need to be doing something because our bodies are changing. I'm wondering, Chris Tiley,
Yes.
whether there is much difference once you get to, I don't know, I'm just going to pull a figure out of the air. Let's go 60, okay? Once you get to the 60 to 80 group, is there much of a difference between the female and male population in terms of ability or loss of strength or coordination, or is it kind of mixture and not gender specific?
I mean, from what I see, I think it's pretty similar, probably more towards the females losing a little bit more, and that's probably a postmenopausal or as a result of that. Again, I don't know whether it's a societal expectation type thing of, particularly in the past, when they were in the 30s, it wasn't as prevalent for women to be in the weights area of a gym, where obviously that's a lot more accepted now within the gyms. It's a pretty good mix, whereas before that's where all kind of the bodybuilding men went, and it was a very intimidating place, where I try and tell people now it's not as intimidating as you might think it is, and actually it's often a friendly place to be, and you get encouraged by others, and half the time people do think you're being judged in the gym, and actually I've realised that everyone's just completely focused on themselves, and they're not even paying a blind bit of notice to what you're doing. So yeah, it's partly, I think, partly my post-menopausal thing, partly their kind of expectation of what they think they should be allowed to do. But then that goes for the men as well. It's once you get to a certain point, or if you can't do what you previously used to be able to do, then why bother at all? And that's a kind of mindset that you often have to try and fight with, because people don't like being sort of suboptimal in their view.
I was wondering whether, because I mean, I don't want to generalize, but if I'm imagining, let's imagine if a couple are fortunate enough to still be together in their later years, it's probably going to be the woman who's clearing after the guy, doing the washing, bending down to the washing machine, doing the washing up, kind of more active around the house, whereas the guy's going to feel, I've done my years down the mine, metaphorically speaking. I'm just going to sit in my armchair and read my paper because I deserve that now. So maybe I was thinking maybe women are actually later on in life still more active, and therefore maybe see maybe live a little bit longer, maybe, or just suffer from less. Like you say, the menopause is very significant, but I don't know. Guys do tend to switch off, don't they, once they reach 65? I think that's it. I've done my bit. I've done my time. Now women just serve me. I think there's a bit of that mentality, isn't there? Especially up north. I can say that. My father-in-law is from Wigan, so But yeah, do you see that? Do you think that that's fair to say, that guys kind of sit back and let age take over quicker than women, or is it, again, am I just generalizing?
I suppose that probably is the case. Obviously, when they're coming in the clinic, I'm not seeing what their home life's like, and you just kind of go off what's in front of you. But I mean, if you start looking at the garden and things like that, then it's a pretty even mix of who's staying active out in.
Well, you see more people than me. You've got a better idea. It's true. The guy's probably out in the garden, which could be a great activity as well. Very cool.
But then I think I get just as many women who come in there and are equally as passionate about the gardening as the guys are. But then whether there's different jobs assigned within the garden, I don't know. But yeah, but I think it's clear that, like I say, the ones that keep the activity going in terms of housework, gardening, sports, they're going to stay in better health up until a later age. I
think I saw a post from you the other. Well, I love following your posts anyway. And if people are, let's just put that in now because I'm saying it. So if you want to follow Chris Tiley, and I totally recommend you do, Then Instagram's probably quite a good place to catch you out, is it? On Instagram?
Yeah,
So Never Too Old to Lift?
Yeah, Never Too Old to Lift
Facebook?
on more Facebook.
More Facebook.
I'm on Instagram as well, trying to build that, and then YouTube as well.
You nearly said TikTok, didn't you? Freudian slip. I saw you go, I'm on
Yeah.
Tik. Of all the things
Yeah,
not
I've
to
had a
tell my
little go,
public.
yeah.
I think it's good. I think you did really well with the miming. I couldn't tell you're not singing that bit of the song.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely worth watching. I've seen you. You mentioned in a post not too long ago, strength training twice a week. And I'm pretty sure it was you just said the clue is just movement, keep moving, doing stuff like that. So there's some great messages going out there. So people, you should be following Chris Tiley and Chris Kitson on social media. Now we're doing that. Chris Kitson, we've got Chris Kitson PT on Twitter. Instagram is where you are definitely more active. Lovely eye for color and flair and very nice, and facial expressions are wonderful. And that is at Rockstar_runners. That's definitely worth checking out. And on there, you've got a link to Linktree as well, which will show you all the details of courses and things coming up. So yeah, okay. So I don't want to give too much away about what you're going to present in the STA Theatre, but that's the title of tonight's show. So just to let people know, in case they've just jumped in the last minute, the two Chris's are going to be presenting Training the Older Athlete for Performance at 2:30 p.m. on day 2 of Therapy Expo in the STA Therapy Update Theatre, which is next Thursday, November the 23rd. So, like I say, without giving too much away, what is a reason why you think, and either of you can answer this, why should soft tissue therapists come and see this presentation? What are they going to gain from it? Either of you.
Who's going to bottle it first? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think it's more just to know what is possible and better advice to be able to give to people, because often the kind of more hands-on side of things that I tend to do is to create a environment and desensitize any pains and try and eliminate reasons why they might not want to start. But unless we kind of give people some guidance on how they can get going with some basic exercises, and particularly for me, when it comes to building strength, an idea of what that actually looks like. And like you say, it's rather than building strength in individual muscles, building strength in movements and how that isn't going to benefit the things they want to do. Whereas if it's just a case of calm the system down through hands-on, get them feeling comfortable, and they just walk out without any kind of plan or idea of where to go. So I think if there's any massage therapists that are watching, it's more just the more resources and places you can point people towards. If you're not comfortable doing it yourself, then I think that's never a bad thing.
Excellent. So guidelines, yeah, very important. It's so easy to read the wrong blog or the wrong kind of reference, and even the wrong paper, and get the wrong idea. Chris, can you add to that? What do you think people should come along and see you?
Yeah, can I just check that you can hear me all right first?
Are you fine?
Yeah,
no, that's fine. That's right. It just froze at my side. That's all. Just checking. Yeah, I think obviously kind of dovetailing a little bit off what Chris says as well, but certainly kind of going into some of the other side of things as well, where you might get some of the older population that come through that actually are already very active as well. So it's that side of, like Chris kind of alluded to it earlier as well, in terms of like people that very much kind of like look at their past and they just compare to their past all the time. So actually kind of how we approach these conversations as well, in terms of how we help them to move forward from that point, instead of just purely just sitting in this kind of circle of comparison all the time. So actually some different kind of segues again that we can kind of move through and be like, right, okay, well, consider this, and let's celebrate the past, but actually let's keep a focus on moving forward. And I think that's super important for people as well. So they're not just purely kind of sat in this kind of negative cycle of, well, I think I should be able to do this because I used to do this. And that was, 20, 30 years ago. So that sort of stuff there, but actually kind of seeing that again, like where are they actually at? Like get that history in terms of how they've got to where they are at the moment, because actually if they're already very active, it's very easy to kind of go in and kind of underload them as well, and really not kind of be at the level that they're at. So it's really being able to ask the right questions again, what that looks like, but also talk through some options with a little bit of Q&A with progressions and regressions as well of, popular exercises and actually give maybe some options there. So, if there's anyone that's there with certain patients they might be struggling with, then also we can give some sort of options there in terms of talking through a little bit of case study work, and then, giving some options that they can try as well.
Fantastic. Chris, Tyler, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think one of the things we haven't really kind of mentioned in whether we're going to expand on it at some point, but then kind of Chris mentioned a little bit there, was the biggest part of introducing resistance training to older adults for me is that the adaptations and the modifications, and finding a starting point that they can then progress from. Because often when we talk about building strength in muscles, we want to push the muscles to fatigue, generally some point within 15 repetitions, and ideally closer down towards kind of 5 repetitions to really build the strength. But most people, when we get started, they're not going to get anywhere near muscle fatigue because the pain kicks in first. So then we might have to adapt the exercise first so they can actually start to find a way of getting even close to that. But then before that happens, fatigue might kick in terms of cardiovascular fatigue. And I generally find they're kind of the 3 things. Ideally, we're looking for muscle fatigue, but we might have to play around with things a little bit so that their cardiovascular fatigue doesn't limit them first, or the pain doesn't limit them first, or their just confidence in general doesn't limit them first. And that's where I think a skill as therapist comes in, is because once someone's got going and they've got to a certain point, then I can kind of help build them from there. But actually, there's much better strength and conditioning coaches and personal trainers that are then actually pointing people towards. Our skill is kind of physiotherapists and sports therapists and so on. It's to adapt around pain and limitations and find ways of getting going to then build from there. And it's the trickiest bit, but it's the most rewarding bit when you get it right. But most people, when they've tried something, they find an exercise they can't do, they'll leave that one out because that's just, they don't like not being able to do something. So you work on all the ones you're really good at, but the big movement pattern that you really could do with being stronger in gets neglected. And then, if you can't do a squat, your quads might get weaker, and because you've got lack of quad strength, your knee pain gets worse, and then it can compound the issue. So it's really kind of finding ways to explore adapting an exercise to get a start point to then build from, is one of the most important parts, I think.
Excellent. I love that. And then you can forward them on to great strength and conditioning coaches and all that. But I love that, summarizing that our job is that to find different options, taking into consideration the pain and that sort of stuff. So brilliant. I'm going to address some of the comments now. I'm going to come back. I'm just going to let you two know, because it can be a bit of a weird topic, but I'm going to ask about, this is performance for the older adults. I'm going to ask you about flexibility and mobility in a second. Just drop that in there, because we've been talking about lifting a lot. I understand it's obviously, Chris Tiley, you're never too old to lift as opposed to never too old to stretch. But I'm still wondering, and I'll ask about the population as to whether there is a difference in mobility and flexibility, because is that related to, getting to lift as well? So, but first of all, we've got a lovely comment. Leslie Campbell obviously is on form. Leslie Campbell, I'll read it out for people who are watching. I take this fab 94-year-old man out walking. He's brilliant. The hardest part of the session is keep his teeth from falling out. What a lovely image. Fantastic. But there you go. Just because someone's got false teeth that fall out doesn't mean they can't get out and do some exercise. It's not a case of overshadowing what they can do just because they're old. I love that, Leslie. Thank you so much for sharing. He's a lucky man to be able to walk with you. We've got Newly Sports Therapy. Gary Newbold has said, Chris T, like that. Damn it, what did he say? Everything Chris Tiley said has been great. So I'm not sure what in particular you're referring to. But yeah, there's appreciation there. Shout out for Chris Tiley. Deborah, I'm going to take a guess. Slugimers, it might be a silent J. Slumers, I'm not sure. But thanks for joining us. Says, hi, I'm watching my iPad, but it won't let me chat on chat, so I've signed in my iPhone. Thanks for letting us know that. That's important. So obviously on your iPhone, you can chat, but not on your iPad. I will pass that on because we need you all to be able to ask questions, which is great. And then Gary Newbold has come back with, hey, I'm in Sheffield. That's up north. Everything, obviously, anything north of Watford is up north, as Gary would say. That's where the accents change. Brilliant. So keep the questions coming in if you've got anything to do with training the older adult for performance. So back to you guys, Chris Kitson and Chris Tiley. Yeah, flexibility and mobility. Chris, we've kind of known each other for a long time, and you know that historically I've been you probably do it as well. It's like runners are still trying to get into swan poses. and they're still trying to touch their toes, and you just try not to be too sarcastic by saying, when in a marathon or a park run are you actually touching your toes? You know, or why are you trying to get your heel to your bum if you're only running 10-minute miles? It's just never going to happen. So, but as people get older, is it fair to say that flexibility and mobility is more of a factor you've got to take into consideration? Let's start with Chris Kitson.
I think yes and no.
Good answer. I like that. Answer. That's why we get on so well. Yes. Yes and no.
It depends. Yeah, I think, I mean, you can see where people come from. And again, there's this mixture here, isn't there, of kind of, you know, what society says, but also what are your real issues, you know, kind of day to day for the person, essentially. When it comes to, I mean, flexibility and mobility can be a little bit different. So flexibility tends to be more kind of like just passively, can you get into these positions passively? Mobility mainly more of an active thing, like can you actually move in these ways? So kind of having that little bit of a difference between two first. And then essentially, like when it comes to things, it's like, okay, well, what do we actually need to be able to produce? So certainly with some of the younger runners, it tends to be a little bit more, maybe less focus on flexibility unless they've got maybe a coach that really pushes it, or they might have seen things in magazines. As you get a little bit older, then people tend to focus on it naturally a little bit more, don't they? But again, I don't think they always know why. So it's one of those where for me, it comes down to total functionality as well. So it's not just purely just have you got the flexibility and mobility, but actually what can you produce within these movements as well? So do you have the strength there? Do we have the power qualities as well? In terms of things like, injury risk reduction, essentially. So especially within running as well. Obviously, the running itself, like you said earlier, obviously the movement isn't huge. We don't need tons of movement to actually go through the gait cycle. But then obviously we've still got daily life aside from that as well. So it's no good, you know, being this kind of stiff runner that's super efficient, but actually can't, you know, bend down to pick up some shopping and pick it back up again as well. So I think we've got to be kind of mindful of this kind of more day-to-day stuff as well, because essentially if they do find themselves in an injured state, then in whatever sense, like outside of running, obviously that can put a halt on the activities that they're looking to do as well. When it comes, obviously, in terms of then increasing flexibility and mobility, obviously this can be done in a few different ways. And obviously there's some studies now that are showing actually if we're going through full range of motion under, you know, loaded exercises and resistance training, then actually we can get a better outcome in terms of flexibility and mobility compared to stretching programs, which are often not what people think, because to get the similar kind of effect from a stretching program, it actually needs to be assisted stretching, and something that generally most people are not actually doing. So I think it's again just having these conversations around what we actually what we think, what we've been told, what our kind of beliefs are around a certain thing, and again just kind of just being curious and just helping people just question it themselves rather than just dictating things and saying, well, you know, we shouldn't be stretching, we should just be lifting instead. But just getting that understanding of what they think it is in the first place, what they're trying to achieve, and then just providing options. And just a lot of the time, they might not know that strength training can actually be really beneficial for their flexibility and mobility. So I think just that delivery of that information and then, you know, just putting it out there for them can be super helpful.
Like it. So look at their daily function. Can you expand a bit on that? That strength training can actually help with their flexibility or mobility. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just in terms of their range of motion. So if we're thinking about it from that perspective, so a lot of the time, let's say, for instance, with a squat, so being able to get down towards the floor and back up again. So if they're training a squat pattern and they're able to get, let's say, past 90 degrees at the knees, that would be a great start in terms of being able to typically reach something from the floor and be able to get back up again. So with a stretching program, essentially they might be able to get some of the range in the short term to kind of get into these sort of positions, but they might not have developed the strength to be able to actually perform what they need to do functionality wise. And that's a lot of the time. I think it's what do we want these outcomes to be, and what's kind of the most efficient way of getting there. And certainly with things like static stretching and things, as we know, it's more of an acute effect with just changes in ranges of motion and changes in sensation. And that's all fine, but it just doesn't last that long. So typically after around about 60 minutes, the nervous system is kind of guarded back up in a sense to the point where it just kind of goes back to how it was. Whereas with strength training and resistance training in general, when we're going through these similar ranges of motion, but under load, we actually seem to get a more of a prolonged effect from that as well, compared to stretching programs.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. That's great. Chris Tiley, your population, I mean, you're encouraging people to lift, to get strength gains. Do you find that you have to take a pause or concentrate on flexibility or mobility in order to get them to be able to perform the movement, or does it all come together?
I tend to find it all comes together, but I tend to do a little bit at the start of a session of, like Chris said, more active moving rather than a kind of static stretch, and just get the body moving to a certain degree, and then maybe go through some of the movement patterns they're going to do in that session with weights, but to start off without weights to then just prepare the muscles for what they're going to do. But I tend to find that most people find their mobility tends to improve without specifically working on any of the stretching afterwards. And I think Chris mentioned a word there, guarded, like the nervous system guarding up there. And I think that's very much when the muscles aren't as strong. The way I see it, and whether it's completely accurate, I'm not sure, but I think the other muscles around it, or with those muscles themselves, tend to kind of go into this guarded state to try and create stability.
Mm-hmm.
But they then don't have the ability to kind of gradually relax and contract back up again when they need to. It's constantly in just a very fixed position. Whereas the stronger they start to get, and one thing we haven't talked about as well is sort of the strength, you can get the rate of force development. So how quickly can you access that strength? And your muscle learns how much it needs to let go, and it can be very reactive. And once a muscle can feel like it can let go as well as tighten, it then allows you more strength. So personally, from my thing, I used to find that my hamstrings were really tight, and I'd stretch and stretch and stretch, and nothing really seemed to happen. And then when I started doing my own sort of resistance type work and really focused on Romanian deadlifts, so that kind of hinging at the hips and really kind of feeling the stretch in the hamstrings, without realizing it, I suddenly kind of sort of went down to touch my toes one day, and I got significantly further than I ever could before, or if you like the sitting reach test. And I think it's probably 𝐓𝐷𝐸𝐿 that I've heard use the term before, but the strengthen to lengthen type thing. And I think it is the I never get the pronouncing right, but this sarcomere-genesis. I think it's been shown just to be as much when you're strengthening as when you're stretching, but you've got the added benefit of the strength at the same time. So for me, if people have never really been interested in strength training up until coming in to see me, they're not going to want to spend hours in the gym. So if they only have a finite amount of time, a little bit of mobility work, more as a warming up the body and the joints and the muscles before doing the work. But I'd much rather they focus on the strengthening side, because they'll get the strength and some lengthening, than just focusing on the stretching, which, like Chris said, it's often short-lived anyway and goes back to what it was. And then you haven't got the added benefit of the strength training, or the strength that you then, is it worth doing in the first place?
Fantastic. Yeah, nicely explained. I mean, that's my thing about, that's why I find that stretching is so many bonuses, or stretching is so easy. And also everyone finds an endpoint. So you feel like you're pushing your body. You can, not every joint, in fact, I mean, some muscles you can't stretch. The quads, it's 3 of the quads, it's very difficult to stretch because they just don't cross a joint really. But anyway, like stretching is often seen as something which you can do at home. You don't need equipment. You're not going to feel intimidated. It's kind of private. You will find an endpoint, so you always feel like you're pushing yourself, which must be good if you're finding an endpoint. But I often find that in that case, people do just do the stretching and they're not doing the strength training, which is why I worry about people getting obsessed with just the stretching. because you could get, like you say, the same gains maybe from doing a strength exercise and using that range of motion, but you can get the added benefit of having the mobility, as in like controlled movement, and being able to, you mentioned power production and things like that, and kind of stopping and starting again, having control and coordination. So that's why I still, despite people like, I don't know, Greg Lehman going on about how stretching is, you know, the new strengthening and stuff, it's like I still think that a lot of people just find the temptation just to, I'll just stretch, I'm going to do my stretching, I'm not going to do any strengthening, you know. And there is this word, isn't there? I don't know how much you've got into. I've given up on it now, but I was going down these tweets about how stretching actually is a strengthening exercise as well, because you're still putting a load on the muscle. And it's like, yeah, but when you look at the research, you have to do it for about an hour, like 3 times a day or something for 6 months to see a little bit of hypertrophy, which is not going to happen. So I think that's a bit of a rabbit hole as well. Just lift some heavy stuff. I think,
like, obviously in a rehab setting, and when you're talking kind of like acute injuries and introducing load into tissues again, then there's an element there where you can think, well, yeah, essentially stretching is tensile load. So it's an introduction to loading, and therefore we can help to, you know, at least like get that introduction of loading back in initially, whilst potentially kind of working on increasing that kind of short-term range of motion, obviously within kind of tissue healing phases. So there's an element of it there where I think it's really useful from a rehab perspective. Also, I guess if you've got someone that is generally kind of quite stressed out, and we know, you know, there's also parasympathetic benefits as well from stretching, so it can certainly help to, you know, just calm the nervous system a little bit, and just, again, even if it's just from a change in psychological state, but if it can essentially change someone's state, so therefore could be obviously used in a positive way as well. Whereas a lot of people, I think, with their warm-ups, again, they're not necessarily that it's really going to help them with even like their session that they're going to do from a physical standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint, it can certainly change their state, move from, I've been at work all day, I've been really stressed out, to, okay, right, I've refocused and now I'm in the gym and I'm preparing for what I'm about to do. So I think there's elements there that we don't always chat about that much that can be really useful. But it's just, again, how we kind of frame it and you know, to help each person, basically.
It's good. Very nice. Jesus, guys, matured so much. It's lovely to hear. It's great. It's really good. Nice one, Chris. Sorry, it sounded a bit patronizing, but it's such sense coming out of your mouth. It always has, but it's lovely. It's lovely to bounce ideas off you. Really cool. Right, where are we? 8:55 already. That went very quickly. So have we got another? Oh, we got a little comment here. Let's go. Gary Newbold is releasing some thoughts here. Let's go. Live from Sheffield. Gary Newbold says, up on the screen if we can. Chris T, great that you are working with the older population. I have 2 kids in the late teens. I've always told them that they can learn so much from listening and learning from older people. Yeah. I mean, sometimes they just talk a load of crap, but it's true. We must have like put them on a pedestal too much just because they're older. God, some of the stuff I know people say, my relatives. But anyway, but yeah, it's true. There's a lot to be learned from them. I like it. And then Gary goes on to say, we were all young once. We didn't invent it. It's powerful words. It's very true. It's very true. Right. So let's just finish off by chatting about, obviously, Therapy Expo is coming up. For people who haven't heard yet, we have these 2 wonderful minds who are going to be joining us in the Sports Therapy Association, or the STA Therapy Update Theatre, which is just next to the STA stand. You won't be able to miss it this year. 1, because it's just huge, and 2, there's kind of a horseshoe. We've got the STA stand, then you've got the Speakers Lounge, which is something which the STA and other people advised to make bigger and possible, so that when speakers are finished, it's a chance to go up and ask them questions and chat with them, which we encourage you to do. So if they're hanging around there, it says, I'm here, let's chat. Because a lot of the speakers just they prefer chatting rather than standing there for 30 minutes and just talking. They prefer the actual interaction. A lot of them don't like the presentations. It's about interacting afterwards one-on-one. And then on the other side of the Speakers Lounge, you will have the hands-on hub from the ST School, from Anna Maria Mazzieri. So it's going to be a wonderful horseshoe of interaction and networking and supporting each other. So that's where we'll be. And like I say, these guys are going to be in the STA Theatre on day 2. If you want to see their presentation, training the older adult for performance, 2:30 p.m. on day 2 next Thursday. Really looking forward to it. obviously that's not the be all and end all of your lives. You've got other stuff going on that we can offer people in terms of CPD courses and things. What have we got going on? Chris Kitson, what have you got coming along or happening?
So I'm just launching a 6-week kind of introduction to strength training. Basically, I've kind of framed it as a strength training challenge for runners. So if there's anyone out there that it's online, so if you are aware of any runners that want to they've got a few barriers in terms of getting started with strength training, it should be really useful for them just in the back end of this year. Get them going with something, and it should be really useful for them.
Brilliant, great idea, I guess, to get it done and into that kind of swing of things with spring marathons coming up next year. Get it done, started now, instead of waiting till January and only having a few months left. Wonderful to know. And if people want information about that, Instagram, best place to go?
Yep. So it's _runners. That's probably the easiest place. And then so you've got the little link in the bio, so the link tree that's got information. You can sign up via that.
Well, of course, it's fantastic. And Chris Tiley, what have you got going on at the moment?
Yeah, so I've got my little lockdown project. I wrote an ebook, which you can also get on Amazon as well. But I've just made the ebook free for anyone who wants to download it. So if you've got anyone who's interested in starting strength training, the principles apply to anyone, but particularly as an older adult, then go into 𝑓𝐫𝐻𝑡𝑢𝑙𝑡𝑢𝑙𝑖𝑓𝑡.com and you'll see quite quickly in the page there's a prompt to download that for anyone. So it helps guide them through the process of creating their own program and picking from exercise variations that have those kind of modifications in and ideas of starting points for them. And then it kind of helps them create a 12-week program that will work for them. Also got an online course that if people found they wanted a bit more of an interactive way of kind of consuming that content rather than reading it, so in video format, but also having a weekly group Zoom chat with myself, then they might be interested in an online course as well. But if they download the ebook first, they'll get an ebook. I'm doing a promotion over the new year, so they'll get emails about the course too.
Amazing. That's a free resource, you say now, that ebook, because I've read it and it's probably been updated since I read it last year, but it's actually, I presume that, I don't know, it might be the same, but it's definitely worth downloading.
It's similar, actually. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
And then for anyone who prefers physical version of it, there is a version to get it on Amazon, so just search Never Told to Lift on Amazon.
Amazing. Fantastic.
But mine's similar. I've got on the Instagram, so Never Told to Lift, or at Never Told to Lift, I've got a similar link tree type thing that's got all the links to everything on there. So if anyone needs to find those links, you can just go to there.
Great. Amazing. Lots of free CPD. And then, like you both so modestly say, if you want a bit more help, then there is this as well. I love it. Rather than just going straight in with give me your dosh, which is lovely. All my guests are the same. I'm sure I kind of subconsciously pick people who are just, first is I want to help you, and second is I can give you this for free, and then third is if you do need a bit of support, we've got this as well, if it works for you or your clients. So really nice to hear. We got a few little closing comments here. Thank you everybody who joined us live. It's so nice to see you in the lounge. It's really nice this day and age. I mean, I'm not complaining at all, but like a year ago, well, actually maybe not a year ago, 2 years ago, definitely there was like 60, 70 people joining live and loads of stuff. These days, maybe 10, 20, 30. But it's so nice that you guys do give up your eating. Really appreciate it because it makes it interactive. It's lovely to answer questions on the spot and that sort of stuff. So really thank you everybody who joined us on the live lounge. Leslie Campbell has said, thank you for tonight, guys. Sorry to miss you all next week. I know, I'm sorry we've been going on about Therapy Expo. It's going to be great. It's going to be the best time of your life. And that's real FOMO or FOMO, however you want to pronounce it, for some people. So if you can't make it to Therapy Expo, then I'm sorry about that. I think, Leslie, for you, and Stevie, we're going to organize like a FaceTime live or something. We'll have to do something. I want to put it on the massive screen so that everybody at Therapy Expo turns around and has a little hi from Leslie.
It'd be a shame not to catch up in person. It's a thing I like about Therapy Expo. It's catching up with everyone you kind of see from previous year.
Yeah, so you just made it feel even worse now. But yeah, sorry, Leslie. It will be magical though for people who we do catch up live with. But thank you for coming and watching it. Also, Gary, thanks guys, great pod. Thank you very much for joining us. Deborah says, "What's the book called again? The name of the ebook?"
So it's Never Too Old to Lift.
Funny that, isn't it? I would have thought. But yeah, Never Too Old to Lift. If you go to 𝑓𝐫𝐻𝑡𝑢𝑙𝑡𝑢𝑙𝑖𝑓𝑡.com. There'll be
Yeah, that's
details
right.
there. Or if you look it up on Amazon as well, there'll be something there, Deborah. How did I do with your pronoun? How did I do with your surname there, Deborah? Sluimas, is it a silent J or is it Sluigimas? Let me know. Or how can you let me know? How's she going to let me know? Just say you were close. That'll do. And Deborah has the last say in the comments with thank you. We'll come and watch it. Oh, there we go. I can meet you in person. You can slap me in the face for getting your name wrong. Fantastic, Deborah. I look forward to that. So yes, this is the last episode before obviously we're at Therapy Expo. There won't be anything next week. There won't be a podcast on Tuesday because we'll be up preparing things, lastminute.com, trying to pacify Gary Benson and just rub his shoulders and massage his hair to let him know everything's going to be okay. That's what we'll be doing, 5 of us in a little row around a chair by the fireside. That's what we'll be doing there. And then we'll see you in person if you're going up Wednesday and Thursday at the NEC Birmingham. It's a different hall this year. I can't remember what hall it was, but it's not the same place as last one. So make sure you just don't go to the wrong place, obviously. Deborah's come back with Sluimas. I told you it was a silent J. Nice one, Matt. Well done. So the next episode will actually be on Thursday, November the 30th. It won't be on a Tuesday for various reasons, or the Wednesday. It'll be on Thursday, November the 30th, where I will be joined by members of the STA team and STA members who don't even know yet they're going to be on the podcast. But we're going to get a few people together who will have a nice chat on Thursday, November the 30th, about how it all went, and maybe some take-home points from that as well. So if you are going to Therapy Expo, do please come and stop and say hi to myself, to Gary Benson, the founder, to Jake, who's the admin there. You'll see us, because just look up and a foot above you, you'll see the 3 of us standing at the STA. And then look back down to normal level height and you will see at the Chris's, for example, and you'll see all the other wonderful people there. Just to reiterate, especially if you're coming to Therapy Expo by yourself, which a lot of people do, they make the trek up and you're feeling a little bit, I don't really know anyone here. The reason why Gary Benson, founder of the STA, does all of this is simply because, or one of the main reasons is a member came up to Therapy Expo years ago and they wrote an email to Gary just saying, I went there by myself and I gathered up enough kind of like confidence just to go and say hi to the STA team. And that was it. Gary came along and I ended up making great friends and spending the whole 2 days with these people. And it was just amazing. So do please have the confidence to reach out and have a chat. We might look a bit scary and intimidating somewhere, particularly Chris Kitson, if you can't see him in person here. But we're really not. And sometimes we ignore you. Sometimes we kind of, our eyes, we're thinking of other stuff, especially if you see a speaker on. I've got 2 days, I've got my own presentations and stuff. So it looks like we don't even see you. We walk straight past you, even if we've seen your little photo. So do please stop us, grab us by the sleeve and just go, oi, hey, how you doing? And we'll appreciate that because we really like interacting and talking to people as well. So even if we look a bit aloof and we've got other things on our mind, do please stop us. And then if we don't want to talk to you, we'll just say, go away, leave me alone. But hopefully we'll have time to say hi, how you doing, and network and talk to each other and support each other, because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to shut the live lounge down. Chris, if you can just hang around for another minute. Thanks again, everyone who joined us. Hopefully, those of you who can make it to Birmingham, we'll see you next Wednesday and or Thursday at the NEC. And otherwise, we will see you the Thursday after for the next episode of the Sports Therapy Association podcast. Thanks very much and take care of each other.